Hey everybody, it's Steve Presser here once again, and we are continuing in our study of the perspectives of the Passion. And so today we're going to be looking at another character that surrounds that crucifixion story, and it is the one of the Roman Centurion. And so as we kind of get our bearings about us a little bit, I want you to think about something, and that is what is life like, or what was life like for someone who was a Roman centurion. So a centurion would have been a soldier in charge of maybe 100 or so people. You might think something akin to, say, a first sergeant over a company in the army, or maybe even a commander type like a company commander. But he would have had a number of soldiers underneath him. He would have had quite a career to get to that point, we would assume. And so it reminds me of my own military time, because I served for 4 years in active duty Army, and I spent 2 years here at Aberdeen Proving Ground before another 2 years going to 1st Special Forces Group out in Washington State. And I had a time where I deployed with them over to Iraq for about 9 months during the year of 2006. It was some of the heaviest of the fighting at the time, and our unit was in charge of a number of different things. But I can remember being a foreigner as a United States soldier in the country of Iraq. And while we weren't there to necessarily be an occupying force, the perception of the people oftentimes was just that we were the enemy, that we were the occupiers, and that somehow we had to be overcome. Somehow we were oppressing them, just simply by the nature of being the force on the ground, if you will. And if you think about the time that Jesus was living in Jerusalem, going through his own sufferings here through this Passion Week, it was the Romans who were the occupiers in Israel. The Jews felt like this was their land, it was theirs to own and to live in and to govern, and yet they found themselves under Roman rule because the land was taken by the Romans at the time. And so it became a very tense situation, and you can almost imagine what it would be like then for a Roman centurion in charge of numerous soldiers to live and to work as an occupying force over a people who had very little control. And so when you kind of have that in your mindset, also knowing that the Roman culture was either agnostic or multi-dualistic or anything but monotheistic as the Jews were, there was a lot of competing ideas, a lot of competing religions, a lot of competing everything. And so when we get to the cross and the Roman centurion and his one bold statement of faith that we're going to read in a minute, there is so much to be seen and so much to discover when we think about, well, what is the perspective of this Roman ruler, this Roman military ruler? Because there's so much that we don't know about him, but we might be able to make a few assumptions along the way. But I want you to just have that in the back of your mind of, well, what was life like for them? What were they accustomed to seeing, especially when it came to executions and handling the people in terms of when it came to things like Barabbas and the two criminals, and now Jesus, and the floggings and all that took place in terms of just policing the people. So if you have a Bible, you can turn to Matthew chapter 27. We're going to look at verses 45 through 54. If you want to also read this account in the other two Gospels, you'll find it in Mark 15, starting at verse 33. And we might turn to Luke chapter 23, verses 44 to 49, because while the story is similar, the wording is slightly different. And there's a couple key things in there that I think are interesting. But let's start with Matthew. It's the biggest account, the longest account, when it comes to the activities that lead up to the Roman centurion's final conclusion of Jesus. So we're going to start here in verse 45. Now from the 6th hour, there was darkness over all the land until the 9th hour. So the 6th hour would be the 6th hour of daylight. So we would say noon today. Leading up to the 9th hour would be about 3 p.m. And about the ninth hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, that is, my God, why have you forsaken me? That's a direct quote from Psalm 22, verse 1. I've often said in a couple studies prior to this that I believe Jesus was actually reciting all of Psalm 22 because of the statements that are included there. But he says this, why have you forsaken me? Some of the bystanders, hearing it, said, This man is calling Elijah. And one of them at once ran and took a sponge, filled it with sour wine, put it on a reed, and gave it to him to drink. But the other said, Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to save him. And Jesus cried out again with a loud voice, and then yielded up his spirit. Now we know with the loud voice that could have been one of several sayings of Jesus, one of which is, It is finished. And that line again could be a reference to Psalm 22, where he says, And the whole world will see that he has done it, or it is finished. And so that's why I say Psalm 22 may very well have been a recitation of Jesus. In verse 51, it says, Behold, the curtain of the temple was torn into two from top to bottom, and the earth shook, the rocks split. The tombs also were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming out of the tombs after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many. When the centurion and those who were with him, keeping watch over Jesus, saw the earthquake and what took place, they were filled with awe and said, Truly, this was the Son of God. So, what we're looking at then is that this Roman centurion had undeniable evidence in front of him to see Jesus for who he really was. This guy's a Roman. He's not a Jew. He wasn't raised in Jewish religious works or anything like that. He wasn't, as far as we know, he wasn't a religious or pious man at all, but here he is having to govern the execution of Jesus. And it was all these events, and maybe more, that led him to the conclusion that this indeed was the Son of God. Now, if we turn to Luke and you look then at chapter 23, verse 44, it reads similar. It's short, but it reads, It was now about the 6th hour, and there was darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour. So the timing is the same. And while the sun's light failed, the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Then Jesus called out with a loud voice, saying, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. So that's a different phrase of Jesus. And having said this, he breathed his last. Now when the centurion saw what had taken place, he praised God, saying, Certainly this man was innocent. So here Luke is trying to draw on the point that the man sees Jesus' innocence, the fact that he was a holy man, a righteous man, an unjust man to be put to death. That was an unjust thing. But he sees that Jesus is innocent. And all of these natural events that are taking place are almost a testimony to that fact. And all the crowds that had assembled for this spectacle. I've always found that to be a really interesting choice word. And all the crowds that had assembled for this spectacle, when they saw what had taken place, returned home beating their breast. And all his acquaintances and the women who had followed him from Galilee stood at a distance watching all of these things. Indeed, I agree with Luke. It was quite a spectacle, not only because of the supernatural things that took place, but just because of all that went into this story as we've talked about over these last several weeks. Well, as we think about this centurion, like I said, we don't have a name for him, but we might be able to make some assumptions about him. The greatest assumption, to the largest degree, we might say, would be that perhaps this Roman centurion was involved with Jesus from the very beginning. Perhaps he was there when he was arrested in the garden. Perhaps he was there escorting Jesus from trial to trial to trial. Perhaps he was there during the scourging and flogging of Jesus. Perhaps he was there when Pilate commanded for him to be put to death. And we know he was there at the site of Jesus' crucifixion, overseeing it all. And so I just can't help but to wonder that perhaps this man had seen so much. And if that's true, what then would the perspective of this man be of Jesus? And so as we kind of look at this a little bit, first off, it's the response of Jesus. He would have seen with his own eyes the response of Jesus to the injustice of his own arrest. The fact that he was betrayed by a friend, the fact that Jesus healed another soldier's ear, soldier, or was it a temple guard? I can't remember. He was with the Pharisees. He would have seen Jesus heal Malchus's ear, and how he would rebuke Peter in the process for taking a sword to him. He would have seen the kindness of Jesus and the gentleness of Jesus, even in the midst of his own arrest. One of the other things that he would have seen is he would have seen the resolve of Jesus. He would have seen the resolve of Jesus to his own torture in the trials that he went back and forth with between Pilate, Herod, and Pilate again. The resolve of Jesus in that torture is that he didn't open his mouth when he was accused. He took the punishment without, name calling or lambasting them. He just simply took it. And so for all the other people that this Roman centurion may have flogged, whipped, killed in his lifetime, to see Jesus handle this in such a different and unique way, he would have seen a resolve in Jesus that was very, very different than anyone else in history. Not only the resolve of Jesus, but the dignity of Jesus. If you think about all the people who hurled insults and reviled Jesus, the ones who may very well have reviled those two criminals on either side of Jesus, the dignity of Jesus and how he handled the false claims, the dignity of Jesus and how he stood before Pilate, the dignity of Jesus as the mob is yelling and shouting to crucify him and who knows what else. He would have been able to see the dignity of Jesus, that something is not right about what this man is being put through. He would have also seen the mercy of Jesus. He would have seen the mercy of Jesus as Jesus, being nailed to the cross and hanging there, forgave those who were executing him, torturing him, mocking him, and hurling insults at him the entire time. To hang on a cross and to be put through all that he was put through, to hang there and to say, in the midst of the pain and the agony, "My God, forgive them, for they know not what they do." That is the mercy of Jesus. To then maybe be standing there and hear the conversation that we talked about a week or two ago between Jesus and this dying robber, that today you will be with me in paradise. As this man who's dying next to Jesus comes to faith in him, the centurion sees and witnesses all of this. And so he's a witness then to the mercy of Jesus. And if all of that wasn't enough, now creation is crying out. And all of these things, whether it's the tearing of the temple curtain or the darkness over the land, the earthquake that splits the rocks and foundations, and the awakening of the dead, all of these things are testimonies then to the reality of this Savior. And then you have also the commitment to Jesus by John and the women who were standing there, who refused to abandon him. And the centurion is taking perhaps all of this in. And what does it lead him to say? That truly this man was the Son of God. Whew. So what do we see here? Well, the first is the acknowledging of divine authority. The centurion has a transformation that's taking place throughout all of this. And it's that the evidence is leading him to recognize the true identity of Jesus. As the sign said right above him, this truly is the King of the Jews. And as we talked about, not only the King of the Jews, but he is the King of the universe. We know that the whole world is held together by his power. We see that this confession of his goes well beyond simple military training, right? His confession that truly this was the Son of God and truly this man is innocent, it transcends all of his military training, all of his military experience, and it demonstrates further a profound and spiritual understanding given all the evidence in front of him. It's also a testimony then to his own personal humility and openness given the situation. As we talked about, the death of Jesus and how he handled everything had to have been so utterly unique compared to anyone else in history who was put to death by a Roman. It just had to be. And the centurion's confession highlights the importance of his own humility and openness to God's revelation in his own life. And so, despite your place in life, your profession, or your self-perception of yourself, this is what's happening to this Roman centurion: is he is being overtaken by the evidence of Jesus and the life and the ministry and example of Jesus. And it leads him to have to make a decision that this is either truly the Son of God or this is truly just simply a spectacle. And it can't just simply be a spectacle. It's too significant. It's too unique. The evidence doesn't allow for it to simply just be coincidence or a spectacle. No, something even more significant is going on. And what we're seeing here is that we're seeing the Son of God being put to death on a cross. And that's what the centurion is taking on. And that's the perspective that he's beginning to have. We also see that there is the power of witness in this. He is beginning to see beyond the surface. Beyond the surface. So the events at the cross, his death, all the things that took place, they were a powerful witness to the person and character of Jesus. We talked about, his resolve and all these different kind of things. He did not die like ordinary men. And that alone tells the story that he is not like ordinary men. He truly is an innocent man. Not only an innocent man, but the Son of God. The power of the witness testifies, too, to the weight of the evidence. So the centurion's statement that truly this was the Son of God is not some random declaration, but it's a reasoned conclusion. And it's based on the events that he witnessed. And it highlights the power of evidence in shaping one's faith. I like to say that faith is not blind. Now, we do walk by faith and not sight. But faith is not blind, right? There is plenty of reasonable evidence to demonstrate to the centurion and to demonstrate to you and me the existence and the reality of Jesus. We also see that there is a role that suffering can play. Jesus' suffering and death became a catalyst for recognizing the divinity of Jesus. It demonstrates the transformative power of suffering. When you see someone suffer the way Jesus suffered, and to handle it in the way in which he handled it, is just absolutely amazing. It's breathtaking. And anything worth obtaining may very well be worth suffering for. Would you agree? And when we think about Jesus, and we like to kind of romanticize this, that God loved you so much that he gave his son. Jesus loved you so much that he went to that cross to die for you. Yes, that's true. He was willing to suffer and to die. But the glory that was set before him was also something to be obtained to a degree. And it was for obedience sake to the Father that Jesus also suffered. There are many different angles to all of this. But for you and for me, we are also going to suffer in this life if we are to follow after Jesus. And so we can look to him as an example in his sufferings and then take that onto ourselves as we live a life for him and after him to say, my suffering is painful, but it's also worth it if it means being obedient to the Father. And that's a critical role. And I think for that centurion who would leave the cross that day and think about his own life and how to honor God in the process, he may very well look back to the sufferings of Jesus to say, if he can endure that, then I can endure this. The writer of Hebrews, he talks about that too, that we have not yet suffered to the point of death as Jesus did. And so we can take heart and we can take faith. Hope and faith. Well, the centurion's confession, it offers a message of hope. And it suggests that each of us may be given the opportunity to see Jesus up close for all that he is, if we're humble enough to recognize it. This centurion was given really a unique perspective in that he was right there at the foot of the cross to see Jesus in his entirety, to see him on full display, as it were, to see the humility of Jesus and the love of Jesus, the patience of Jesus. And if we look hard enough, you and I can see that too. The centurion also demonstrates great faith, and his example encourages us to look beyond the surface and to look at those deeper things, to seek a deeper understanding of all that God is doing as he moves, works, and lives in the world around us. And then finally, it's the power of the cross. The centurion's experience at the foot of the cross underscores the transformative power of the cross. And it reminds us that when we encounter the suffering Savior, we will willingly take up our cross for his sake as well. The cross transforms people. When you think about how Jesus suffered and died and the example that he gave for us, it then, just as it did for this centurion, it makes you stand and look at it and say to yourself, if he can do that for me, what more then can I do for him? And that's not a response of anything less than one of worship and gratitude. And that, I believe, is what the centurion ultimately saw in the end of all of this, was he saw Jesus for all that he was. And it moved him, and it shook him, and it shaped his life to the point where he was able to stand and say, truly, this is the Son of God. And we don't know all that would follow for that centurion. And I don't know all that will follow for you. But if that is your confession of faith, that truly, truly, Jesus is the Son of God, he died for you, he died for me. If you can say that he has died for your sins and he's given his life for you, and that you choose to trust in him now and follow him all of your days, I believe that your experience, much like the centurion's experience, will be one that will shape and change your life forever. And I pray that this has helped you to see Jesus in a new light, just as this centurion did. We have one more to go after this week until Resurrection Sunday. I hope you'll continue to join us. Take care and God bless.